So what we're going to do to this morning is talk about the state of SL, GP, talk about some different options as far as moving to cloud services or even still maintaining the instances that you have. So the Dynamics SL timeline for the end of life, it actually expired in January 9th of 2024. Right now, they're currently into the extended support. And it's important to understand that when you're in extended support, what Microsoft provides are just critical security updates to your environment until the point that that support ends. GP is following that same suit of SL, where in December 31st of 2029, the product updates and support will end, and ultimately the extended support for security updates will end in April 30th of 2031. What's important about those dates are, at some point as an organization, you have to make a determination. What are you going to do? And you're far enough along right now to make those decisions to determine, are you going to move to the successors and move to the cloud services, or does that mean that you want to stay where you're at for the duration? But what I can say is no matter if you choose to stay the duration or move to a cloud service, Intelitech has your back. We're here to support you. We still support SL, even though that the mainstream support has ended, even though that the extended support will end. We'll probably still support SL well beyond that point and certainly have the capabilities to do that. So what is your decisions, right? And you have to say, which direction do I want to go? And Microsoft GPSL on the right-hand side, this is the legacy systems. What Microsoft is doing is deprecating this technology, and they're moving everybody, the recommended successor is moving you to what's called a SaaS-based option. It's software as a service. And Business Central is a SaaS product that Microsoft has rewritten from the ground up to really emulate what GP was and also SL. We do offer other ERP options in terms of Sage Intacct. And while there's the similar functionalities of each, depending on the industry you're in or what the features and functionality are the decisions of where you want to move. Now, I want to take a step back and say that what we're talking about is really this Microsoft customer solutions. And while there's Dynamics 365, which is where Business Central lives, Microsoft also has different suites. And Rick kind of alluded to that Intelitech supports all of these areas. So if it's Microsoft 365, that's the productivity suite, that's Exchange Server and Intune, or the Power Platform, which we'll talk about a little bit later, or even Azure Cloud Services, where we host the environment up into Microsoft space. We have a lot of options for the directions that you want to go. But right now, we're going to talk about this bottom left quadrant, which is Business Central, right? So currently, many of you are already on GP or SL, maybe you've even converted to Business Central, but there's a pathway of which way you're going to go. And what I did is, the decks will be available to you, but I wanted to put together some key features and functionalities of which software solution is best for you. And what I would say is that if you're looking for that all-in-one ERP, you're looking for finance and inventory and projects and CRM, the Microsoft ecosystem being so integrated and collaborative amongst the tools that they have makes a really sound judgment to go that direction. There's a deep integration to Microsoft technology, be it Microsoft Teams, Excel, Power BI for analytics, Dynamics CRM for customer relationship management. That deep integration makes it a seamless system that you can utilize going forward. And on the right-hand side, there are different industries where if you're manufacturing or distribution, Business Central will work really well for you. If you're in retail or finance or logistics as well, senior living, all the systems that we support work with these industries, but having the conversation with us will help you determine kind of the pathway and the fit gap that makes the most sense for you. And in terms of GP and SL, well, again, while Microsoft is really trying to push clients to that Business Central pathway, it is an aging technology, but it's not end of life yet. And so you have a lot of options and some time to determine what you want to do. I do have one more slide just to show, just the different features and functionalities, to show in terms of, if you're manufacturing and inventory, if you need project management, maybe advanced analytics, there's some powerful tools. There's Power BI. Mark will talk about Solver for, forecasting and budgeting. But, the systems that you choose, again, you have some choice. In Azure, and for Dynamics GP and SL, there is this hosted option of Azure. Now, one of the considerations you have if you want to stay with the current system is, what am I going to do with the infrastructure that I have to support that current system? And so what I wanted to do is take a few minutes to talk about Microsoft Azure in terms of what is the best option for you to stay on-premise or move to the cloud. And for anybody that may not have a full understanding of what Azure is, you have to think in its most simplest terms, it's just a cloud platform managed by Microsoft that delivers those services over the internet, okay? The key benefits for you is that it's a consumption-based service. You pay for only the resources that you utilize. You can do reservations in 1 or 3 year increments to conserve costs and to forecast out, but the pay-as-you-go option makes it very beneficial from even a scaling perspective. Suppose that you have servers today on premise, and let's say you have an event like a donor event system, and you're going to be hit really hard for those resources. Well, you can easily scale up and across with Microsoft Azure. And by doing that, you can add more resources to the individual server, or you can add more servers to it so that it can load, take the load and balance it out. Microsoft's Azure platform allows for high availability, 99.9% uptime guarantee. However, they do also support 99.999 to the 16th if you choose at a cost. But if that uptime is required to have no downtime during a year, Microsoft has the infrastructure to support that need. There's also the ability to do disaster recovery. There's there's built-in backups, restoration services, and if you choose, even if it wasn't to just manage GP or SL, your infrastructure on-premise could be used with disaster recovery to create clones of your environment. So if something was to happen on-premise, you could fail over to the cloud and then be back in business. And of course, with everything Microsoft, they have the advanced security. There's Defender for Cloud. There's advanced threat protection. There's the regular updates you get. So a very, very secure environment. Now, when you're talking about cloud services, again, we're on the bottom right here. When you're speaking about Microsoft Azure, what we're really talking about is infrastructure as a service. So on the left side, on the bottom left quadrant, we were talking about Business Central being a software as a service, and I'll explain that in a minute. But an infrastructure as a service is plainly this. You're taking your infrastructure on-premise, the hardware in your data closets or your data center, and you're shifting that to Microsoft. You still manage the environment, you still control the environment, you're just leveraging their hardware for that. When you look at it from a responsibility perspective, a shared responsibility, I think it's easiest to see the different pathways from on-premise to SaaS through this type of model. When you're on-premise, you may be operating Dynamics GP or SL, okay? And what that means is that the entire stack, meaning your physical machines, the actual network, your application, your accounts, your data, your information, the machines that connect to it, they're entirely your responsibility. When you move to Microsoft Azure, which is an infrastructure as a service, what you're doing is you're replacing the on-premise physical aspect and moving it to the cloud, but you still have a responsibility to maintain the operating systems, putting the security patches on and the updates, managing the network and who has access to what, servicing the applications like a GP and SL, making sure that the accounts are managed and servicing all the data that's there. So while GP would be migrated to the cloud, what we're talking about is just leveraging Microsoft's infrastructure, their hardware, to host those services. I'm going to kind of skip over PaaS, but that's platform as a service, and I'm going to talk about Power Automate. It's kind of a hybrid between PaaS and SaaS, but we'll explain that a little bit later. But your SaaS environment is where BC and CRM lives. And when you look at the shared responsibility matrix, you're going to see that all of the servers, all of the network, all of the operating system updates, they're all managed, and the application itself, being it Business Central or Dynamics CRM, they're managed by Microsoft. Your responsibility in a SaaS environment is to ensure that the accounts are active, that you have your devices connecting to it, and that the information and data that you have, it's yours. Okay, so the shared responsibility kind of migrates and moves as you go from an on-premise environment to a SaaS-based environment. So you may be asking yourself, well, what does that mean for GP, right, or SL? And I apologize, I don't have a screenshot of the SL login. But it really doesn't matter if you're on remote app, meaning that you log in directly to the server, or you use sorry, that's remote desktop, or remote app where you log into either a web interface or use the remote app through the control panel, or if you have the GP web client, what happens inside of Microsoft Azure is nothing. It really doesn't change that much. You have a very, very, very similar experience. The only difference for you is instead of logging into those environments on premise, you're now looking at those services online. It's very highly accessible. It's a secure environment, and there's also archiving and retention options. So should you move to a Business Central as an ERP option, but you say, you know what, for governance purposes, I still need to maintain my SL or GP, you could keep an archiving environment in a cool or cold state in Azure, so you could still access that same environment for future needs. Now with Azure Cloud, when we look at the total cost of ownership and the comparison of what's the difference between on-premise and Azure Cloud, for on-premise, I've worked in higher ed for a long time, and we always had to think 12, 16, 18 months out ahead of what we're going to need. And there, every time you make a request, that's a high capital expenditure that's going to be needed. Now you hope that you're not going to overutilize resources and it's not going to be underutilized. And so there's some pros and cons that are shown there. Even plant management, managing the the electric and everything that's required. That whole thing shifts when you move to Microsoft Cloud because it's a consistent subscription base. You move from capital to an operating cost. It's fixed, and the maintenance is then managed by you and Microsoft. Very scalable and efficient. Now, one of the things I want to mention and kind of summarize here is that, when I think about what we offer at Intelitech, our key thing is to focus on your needs. So as Rick had alluded, if it's, the financial system or your hosting options or even consulting on, just looking at like an assessment of your environment, give us a call. We've built our trust and understanding of each of our clients by, sitting down, talking through and explaining exactly, what we think from a software perspective, what would be the most beneficial to you. So with that, I'm going to conclude and open it up for any questions and answers.
We've got one question that's come in from the chat asking how they can best find out more information about Azure. Is it reaching out to their ERP consultant they work with most, reaching out to you directly? What's the best way if they have some Azure specific questions?
Yeah, absolutely. And we can provide some contact information. But if you reach out to us, we could sit down with your finance team, with your IT team, your executive leadership. We could sit down. We could talk about what it is that you're looking for. As I said, thinking even outside of the ERP, if there's other needs that you're looking to maybe safeguard your on-premise with backup and disaster recovery in the cloud, or even migrate your on-premise environment to the cloud, certainly give us a call. We can schedule some time, talk about it, and find out what's the best fit for you.